Well, that's today's news. Well, quite remarkable pictures to end on then. Let's take a look at tomorrow's, and this is Sky News and the paper preview. Much more to come of the newspaper and front pages as they come in. And we're looking through the papers with Daniel Costello and Benedict Pavio. Good evening to you. We're going to start with the Independent. And this is the GCSE row that continues to rumble on. Let's have a look at the front page of the Independent there. GCSE row escalates. You've betrayed our pupils, Gover's told, and possibility of legal action as well.
That's right. I think Mr. Gove is going to have rather a lot on his in-tray. There are possible decisions about legal action being taken against exam boards by parents who thought that their offspring were going to get C's that have now turned into D's. And it seems that this decision is really, I mean, day by day, it's just not going away. The papers are really looking at this and saying that Mr. Gove has betrayed these children. It was a last-minute decision, that this is changing lives, stopping them, some of them from going to sixth form college places. And also, it seems there's going to be a demonstration, this one by teachers, on Tuesday, a protest demo outside the Department for Education. So, obviously, there is a lot of anger, and I think the last-minute aspect of the decision has just added fuel to the fire. If at least the teachers had known. But now it's parents who feel betrayed and also teachers who feel betrayed. Well,
obviously the teachers, because they'd predicted a lot higher grades for their students, and it must be awful to take them through all this work and say, you know, you will get a C, and then they end up getting a D.
There's a great letter here from a teacher down in Surrey who's talking about how he has a number of poorer children who've been harmed, he says, you know, very egregiously by these lower grades, and that they've harmed their chances at uni, and they've, you know, and he had to come in and explain to them how, you know, they're going to have lower grades, much lower grades than they expected. You know, on the other side of the coin, the reason behind this is a concern that there's been grade inflation over the years, and that there's a much higher percentage of the population getting A's and B's, and so I think there's a hope of recalibrating it and having it a bit fair, but the concern is they did it just, you know, it's a bit harsh. Of how do you do that at one point?
How do you phase it in, though?
Well, the thing is that apparently they'd realised, looking at the results, potentially that there was going to be a rise. So it was once they saw that there was going to be another rise in the pass and in the grading, that apparently, it seems, the paper thinks that this decision was taken. Now, you know, if it is going to change not only the trust between children and their parents, children and their teachers, and expectations, and then places in college, this obviously is very important. And I think that kind of lack of trust is not helpful when it's not always cool in a lot of families to study. I don't think they need that kind of hindrance. So, yes, OK, I get your point, Gillian, of saying that, you know, when do you phase it in? I think it's like anything. It's like a driving test or something. You know what the goalposts are. You know what is a girl, what isn't a girl. But you don't go changing the rules at the last minute.
But I can see the other side a little bit, too. I mean, you have to, at some point, you know, in this moment, in this culture, you know, where everyone who plays gets a trophy and everyone who takes an exam gets an A, I think in the long term that's not very helpful. I mean, there is a great thing about work ethic and someone who works hard getting the best score. And so the question is, how do you change that, I think, is the question. They may not have done this in the correct way, but I can see the point behind it.
But why can't we accept that perhaps children are getting smarter? Why do we see the negative and think, well, it's been dumbed down rather than they're actually improving?
Yeah, and it may be. I mean, I think that's it's a valid concern. I do think that there's been grade inflation here in the UK, but there's been enormous grade inflation in the US. I do think, though, that why I think this letter is so important is, like in the US, we have something called the SAT, which is the exam that we all take before uni, and there's always been much concern about that it isn't necessarily fair. Statistically, young girls get poor scores, minorities get poor scores, and so there's a concern that they have not framed it in a way that's fair to everybody. And so this letter, I think, is quite smart and
this is
painful.
A letter from a head
It is a letter
teacher.
just from a teacher
that's saying, to the education secretary.
Yeah, saying to the education secretary, saying, look, this isn't fair. You know, I mean, these are kids that need a leg up, and here you are, you know, hurting them.
I think it's
you know?
easy to predict that he'll get lots more of those kinds of letters. I get the point.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think I grew up was schooled in a French system where there is a lot of competition, and I don't think it's a bad thing to be first and second and third, and I didn't get traumatized because there were goals, so I think that is a good thing. One of the other arguments, of course, is to say that actually what children are getting used to is they're being geared to particularly be good at passing exams. And I think one of the French concepts very much is that you study geography and history, till you're 18. You don't get to stop them like one does in the English system at O-levels. And that's why there is also, not in these articles, but sometimes on a regular basis, this comparison to the baccalaureate, which means that whether you want to go down the artistic side stream or the scientific, that for the subjects that you take have a different value in your exam, but that you actually, until you're 18 years old, do maths, do history, do geography. And the French concept is that makes for a better all-round individual. It's called a bagage culturel, a cultural little suitcase, if you will. And I think that is quite good because everybody doesn't know what they're going to specialise in at the age of 13 or 14.
Yeah, not
lots of people study things, you never then go on into that.
We do know that this is going to continue. This is a big issue.
It's not going away anytime soon.
Also, the story being looked at in the eye, these children are not statistics, you've betrayed them. The point that you mentioned there about O-levels, we are given to believe that that's something the government might be returning to, but possibly by another name. They also have been criticised for gearing people towards just passing the exam.
Well, this is where I think it is interesting to look, for example, at the French system, which there's a French baccalaureate, but there's also an international baccalaureate. And I think that concept of studying these, what are basic subjects, like language, like maths, like geography, like history, are things that do stand you in good stead, whatever you go on to do later on. So personally, I think the French system is quite a good one.
It's a big global debate. I mean, in the U.S., former President Bush implemented No Child Left Behind. And the big anchor of that was more standardized testing. Now, several years in, there's an enormous backlash, not just from teachers, but from academics and researchers who are saying, maybe we are gearing this a little bit too much to an exam, and there may be a better way of doing it.
Also, Gillian, not only does the curriculum change all the time, and the poor teachers have to play catch-up all the time, but if also at the last minute the grades get changed, I mean, that's an awful lot of moving the goalposts, and I don't think it's a good way, therefore, for Michael Gove. I think he now needs to do some sort of exercise where he really sits down with teachers. I think accountability. We want accountability in our politicians in many things. We want accountability from bankers. Surely teachers need accountability. They owe accountability to their pupils, and also then I think the government, the authorities, whoever the government of the day is, and who makes these political decisions, need to show a certain accountability and trust to teachers.
And it will be quite interesting to see how the legal ramifications pan out, really.
That could be quite complicated and protracted.
And the appeals, will people get their grades reinstated at a higher level?
Right.
That's another point that was made in the article, and you quite rightly point out.
OK, Benedict and Daniel, for the moment, thank you very much. This is Sky News and the paper preview. Much more to come, the newspaper front pages as they come in. Do stay with us.
All next weekend from 7:15 on Sky Channel 313.